Hello everyone and welcome to a new edition of Low Code Cafe, episode 101. That's quite an achievement. The main topic for today, we are continuing with the Zoom integration, very interesting techniques. But before that, let me briefly introduce this event to new folks. So this is a community event we are doing every Wednesday at the same hour. It's an event where we present new capabilities in the product. We showcase use cases. We show how to achieve various integrations like we are going to do today. Sometimes we also have guests from our community demoing interesting projects they are building, interesting techniques. So if you are up to the challenge, we'd love to host you in this webinar. As you notice, the event is being recorded. So this will be available after the webinar to go back to it, browse around the information, and there's already 100 videos out there with such very good technical content. So I suggest to subscribe to always be up to date with the training videos that we create. Good. So the star of the day is Dale Warner, our head of support. He started last week with the Zoom integration, and if you haven't watched that, I recommend it to you. And today he will walk us through more advanced topics. But before that, Dale will also give us the stories from the trenches, from our support and community channels. Dale?
Very good. Hello. So, from the trenches today, we have on our release 1.21, we previously released one hotfix. There's 3 more out there that are available to you to install. Those of you who are on 1.21, you'll see these, and you can either install them with our old user interface, or there's the button up there for the new user interface. So I highly encourage you to use the new user interface and test that out, see that it's a better user experience. Some of these may or may not apply to you. So there's an issue with search that was fixed that dealt with a token, and the link from the search results wasn't displaying correctly. So again, we only recommend that you get these if you need the particular feature. We have several users that are using our date time picker to select a range of values, and that feature wasn't working originally in version 1.21, so that's fixed. And people who are using drop-down with checkboxes, there was an odd behavior where if you did just a certain thing, the on-submit validation error would be repeated as many times as there were checkboxes. So if you've encountered that one, you can install that hotfix. Beyond that, I would encourage you to engage in Campfire. It's another meeting that we hold. It's in a meeting format, not a webinar format. We do that this same hour on Fridays. We gather around the virtual Campfire, talk about low code in general, our product in specific, and one of the features that we do in there is ghost stories. That's stories that either are completely scary, perhaps because you spent too long trying to make something happen, and it ends up being something we can share and save the same pain for other members of the community. So I have a ghost story about the ZoomAPI I'm going to share today, share in that meeting. So that's the tease. You need to come. Links for this episode, let me go ahead and grab those and put them on the clipboard. Give me just a second, I'll do that. Great, you should see them now. So we have our webinar recordings, community portal, a feedback form for this event. If you want to suggest anything or give us excuse me, feedback on our event. But then I've got the two links for Zoom, the marketplace where you create an app, and the API reference. So that'll be useful for any projects that you might decide to implement. And so we move right on to hands-on low coding and doing something with Zoom. So last week, in our last episode, we set out some next steps. What else could we do? Because what we did was work our way through security in Zoom, and then built a listing that listed out all the webinars that were on our account in Zoom. And so we set out that we could do other things like retrieving attendees to a meeting or a webinar, absentees if the people were scheduled and didn't come. All that stuff is available within Zoom. There's also the ability to create and control webinars or meetings. And then there's also webhooks where Zoom will tell you what's going on within Zoom. They'll communicate with an API of yours to give you information about what's behind the scenes at Zoom. So today we're going to take on two of those. One is that we're going to create meetings from a template. So we'll define something that creates a meeting on Zoom. And then we'll also take a look at how Zoom webhooks can be easily set up. I've already done that, so I won't be walking through it, but I will show you the configuration and the impact. So let's start out with that first one. We're going to be creating a meeting. So the idea is that on our Low Code Academy, we are now holding office hours. We do that 2 or 3 times a week. And it's an opportunity for our Academy folks to come in and ask questions. The procedure up till now has been that we've been putting these in creating them as entities on our Academy website so that we can let people know that they're there, but we've had to manually paste the Zoom link into the listing, and also we have to create the meeting by hand in Zoom. So let's just get a look at what that looks like now. So on our one of our management screens in the Academy is an office hours listing, and we have things like a title, the date that it's going to happen, how many people have signed up, and the Zoom link. And so our goal would be that when we do a new office hours listing and we pop up this form, that we can give it a title, a date, and then instead of a meeting URL, when we hit add, it'll just automatically say, well, you don't have a meeting URL, it'll create one and populate it there. So do it all in one step. That's our target. So see if we can get there today. To do that, we're going to have to do these 5 things. And like I did last week, I'm going to walk through them backwards. So the end result is that when you're adding an office hour slot, it will automatically create the meeting. To do that, we're going to have a workflow that lets you create a meeting from a template. That's a Zoom template. So workflow will accept some inputs, and the result will be a meeting. In order to do that, we have to have credentials on Zoom. In order to do that, we have to have some tokens that have we don't have to, but we're going to put our Zoom credentials into some tokens. And then we also have to configure Zoom to allow all this. So these are the steps that we're going to work through. And so we'll go ahead and get started on that now. So the first step has to do with Zoom. We need a server-to-server OAuth app that is configured in the app marketplace. The server-to-server says that our server can communicate with their server, and it's limited to just our account. It's not an app that you're going to publish, but it does let you it lets you define what the scope of how this app is going to act on your behalf. So once we have created the app, we'll get some credentials, provide the scopes that we need. And since we're doing meetings, we're going to need at least the ability to read and write meetings, and we'll activate it. So let's take a look at that on the marketplace. This is the app that I dealt with last week, and I had it already created and I didn't show it to you. So I'm going to actually create one today. This is going to be the one for the Low Code Academy. So you go to the marketplace, Zoom Marketplace, and you use the build app function. We're looking for server to server OAuth, and if you haven't authorized that yet, you need to take a look at their instructions, or last week's video talks about how to do that, but we're going to do that. And this is going to be the Academy. We'll just call it the Academy app. It creates it and gives us our credentials, and we're going to need those. We might as well go ahead and take care of that piece of the puzzle as well. So no, we'll get that in a second. So we'll go ahead and walk all the way through. This is the app that is we'll give it a brief description, doesn't really matter. This is Plantanet. I'm Dale. So one of the things, and we're not going to turn it on, but I'll mention it here. This is the spot where you turn on the webhooks. If you turn it on, you can subscribe to webhooks. We'll come back to this when we get into the webhooks part here in a little bit. So we'll just continue on. We don't need it. The next thing is the scopes. How is this app going to be able to act on our behalf? And what we're going to want is things having to do with meetings. So we're going to be able to view and manage meetings. I don't think we need anything else, and we will continue with that and then activate the app. So that's the Zoom stuff. It says that we're allowed to do it, and then we're going to need these credentials in a minute, but we'll come back to that. So we've got the credentials, we've provided meeting read and write, and we've activated it. Next thing is about a meeting template in Zoom. Let's see if we can get Zoom open here. In Zoom meetings, you have meetings that are scheduled upcoming, anything that you've scheduled in advance. And you can see that we have some Low Code Academy office hours that are already established. But what I did is you can, when you're editing one of these, you can save that as a template. So I've created a Low Code Academy office hours template, and we're going to be using this template. It's got an ID here that we'll use to say we want to create a meeting that looks like this. Now, interestingly, I found that even though you create a meeting and you give it a template and you point to this template, not all the features of this template seem to make it into the meeting. So I had to go back through and set some. So we'll talk about that as we actually create the meeting. Okay. So we've created the meeting template, and again, I did that. You can create a template from the meeting definition that you have. And let's see if I can figure out where I am here. All right. So the next thing that we want to do is to take those, set up the parameters, and we're going to use our prior project to set those up. We were working in our clone of Community Portal last time, and we had this ZoomAPI namespace that had account, client secret, client ID, all these things that we're going to need. And so if you didn't see last week's, this would be a great spot for you to go and take a look at that episode to see how to do that. But we are going to download this whole token namespace. And so we'll export it and copy it. And we're going to go into our Academy, and we're going to need this same namespace in here. So we will go to Configuration and Tokens and import the namespace. Now this has the values from our other apps, so we're going to have to fill these in. So we're going to need all these ones that we're talking about. So there's an account ID, and I'm going to copy it here and edit and paste it in. Actually, that one was the same, so we'll save that, close. The next one is the client ID. This is the ID of the app. So we will edit that and paste it. The last one we're going to need is the client secret, so we can copy that. And I'll just mention these things should be kept to yourself. And when I do this, you're going to see a client secret. But by the time you get a chance to use it, it will be changed, so it doesn't matter. So having done that, we have our account, client secret, and then we have some other things, these tokens that actually get us the information we need to work with Zoom. And so the get Zoom access token does the authentication. And so we're going to run that as a test token and see if we get output.
Do you need a value in there?
Yeah, I don't remember that we do, so I'm a little bit confused by that one. It doesn't need a value. I don't know why it's assuming we do in this pasted one. But thanks for trying to help me. So I'm going to try and export this one again just to see if it will do better. Yeah, and so now it's returning a good value. I don't know what was broken with that. That was something that
you're still on the clone there.
Oh. All right. All right, so now we're actually going to have to go in and figure out what's wrong. This is running a completely wrong one, so I'm going to, rather than importing, I'm going to delete it and we will rebuild it. So Zoom access token, delete. I'd forgotten that that was a workflow token, so that's where I got into trouble. So get Zoom access token was a workflow, and importing a workflow, it lost the correct reference to the token. So we'll try this again. So we're going to export this item, the workflow. It needs to be imported here. This is going to go into the, I didn't create a namespace yet, so we should do this. We'll add a namespace called ZoomAPI and save it and select it. And let's go ahead and save and test this and see if we get a result. So perfect, we're getting an access token that comes back. So the workflow is necessary to get the access token, and then we're exposing it here as, and I want to make sure I get the name right. It's get Zoom access token. So we will create get Zoom access token. Its definition is the run a workflow, which is the one we just created, typically at the bottom. Get Zoom access token. And so now we're going to save and test that, and it's returning a value. So I had forgotten that it was a workflow. We needed the workflow before we created the token. Good. So we've done this much. We've showed that we can get the Zoom credentials, and so we now know what we're doing there. And so now we can move on to building the workflow that's going to actually create our meeting. So the goal is it's going to create a meeting from the specified template. So for inputs, we're going to need the topic we want to create, the start time, the template that we're going to work from, and the time zone. So let's see, and we're not going to need this community portal. Trying to limit how much stuff we've got going on here. So we have a workflow, and cleaning up another screen here so I can see my notes. We will use our Zoom namespace, and let's name it right away. And this is going to be I'll go ahead and be specific here. So the inputs we're going to need are the topic that we want to appear in our meeting. We'll also do a start time. And this is going to come to us as text as well. The template ID will come as text. That's the Zoom template ID and the time zone. I'm going to default this one. We don't have to provide a value, but so we'll provide it as this, but these others are actually, I'm going to default them all for testing purposes. And then when we will be passing them in when we're actually using it. So the The topic that we're going to create, and I'm going to call it test to start with, test meeting. So when we're testing, it's just going to create that in Zoom. We'll be able to see it very easily. We'll give it a date. These dates come in the format, and there's some discovery that went on here to find the formats and all. And if we have time, we'll talk about that discovery as well. But these are in the format of year, month, day with a T, and then the time that you want it to create in UTC time. Our meeting template is this one. So we can copy and paste that ID. And so when we test, it'll always use that one. And so that's good. From an output perspective, we're going to want to have the JSON, the full return of the meeting information. So we'll call that MeetingJSON. And we're also going to have a JoinURL. This is going to be real useful because we'll be able to just pop that directly into that link that is going to get created on the add button. But, and I'm just going to anticipate that the value, I'm going to create a token that is MeetingJSON somewhere in our process. And in the same way, we'll create another one. Well, I'm going to save that one aside. We're just going to be called something else, but we'll make sure that all these get wired up by the time we finish our process. Our process is really going to be pretty simple because, I mean, there's some details in it, but what we're doing is a server request to the Zoom server. So this is Zoom request. And so now we get to what URL are we going to do? So now this is where we're going to need the information from the API. And that link was on our, I think I can get there from here as well. Develop documentation, API reference. So this is going to tell about all the different things that we can do with Zoom and how to do it, but we're going to look at the API endpoints, and what we're going to need to do, what we're looking for is to create a meeting, right? So all the endpoints are grouped by their topics, and so we'll open up the meeting topic, and so we have the ability to list meetings, create meeting, delete, get, there's all kinds of stuff, but the one we're going to want to do is to create a meeting. So this is going to drive us to the documentation, tell us exactly how to do it, what information is required, what it looks like, and so this is the one that we're going to use. It shows the format is users, user ID, meetings, and there is a special user ID called me that you can use as well. So we'll copy this and note that it is a post as well. So we'll copy that format and go back to our coding. This is the URL that we're going to need. Again, since it's we're already authenticated, we just want to do it under the ID of ourselves. If we wanted to create it for a particular user, we could do that. It is a post, and so we have to say post. The content of this data is something we're going to have to work on a little bit, so we'll come back to that in just a second. But the headers section is real important because we need, and we covered this last week, we need an authorization. Header, and it has the value of bearer, and then our token that we had a little while ago, the get Zoom access token. So all that's the security that we worked our way through last week. We're also going to use another header that tells what we're sending it. So we're sending content type that we're sending here is application JSON. When we successfully create our meeting, if we've put the right body in there, we're going to get the meeting out here. And that's the same thing that we wired to the output a little while ago. So that'll match up nicely. So this is going to return some JSON. So the question then is, what do we put in the data, in the body that we're sending to make it work? And if we go back to the Zoom Meeting API, it shows the format of what you can include. We get all the way down to the bottom here. There's start time, template, time zone, topic. So these are the kinds of things that we're going to have to provide. And so there's a little bit of experimentation, exactly what settings you're going to need and things like that. Plus, yeah, so this is JSON, and I'll just use the copy here, and it's far more than we need. So I'm going to, as I have before, use Code Beautify to kind of take a look at this. And so we'll go to our JSON viewer and get through the advertising, and we'll paste that in here. And now we can view this in code form, and we can do a little editing, take the things that we want and don't want. So the things that we know for sure that we're going to need are the agenda, the duration, password, things like that. Other things, not so much. So, but we know we are going to need a template as well. So what I did was start working through and eliminating things that I didn't need, creating a meeting out of that, and then testing to see what I got, and then work from there. Since I've already worked through it, the question is which things we're actually going to want here. I'm going to whack out a lot of this and just go to these core ones. So there we have an agenda, a start time. We're going to need a template ID and a time zone. There's some other ones that we're probably going to want. I don't want to worry about tracking fields, but this is a little bit of a spot where you'll have to do some experimentation. What exactly do you want to include? But we'll start here. And so we just have to make sure this still looks like valid JSON, and it is. We could actually validate that by pasting it in over here and saying beautify, and if it didn't like it, it would let us know. So we still have good JSON. And so this is where we'll start with to build this. And so we'll paste it in here. And now for these things, we're going to want to put our values in here. So instead of what they had, their suggested my meeting, we'll put in topic, which is from our input. The start time, same way, we'll use our input. The template ID, same thing, we put it in our input. Time zone, their suggestion was America, Los Angeles, but we're going to use the one that comes from our template, from our inputs. And the name of this meeting, we're going to just use the same value as the agenda. We could be more advanced at that, but so this is kind of the process that you use to figure out what you want to send as data, and then wire it to your inputs.
Dale, I'm sorry if I missed this, but what is the type? Type 2?
Well, I didn't talk about it. The type, I think, is a meeting type, and it's implicit. It was, if we go to the API, it was here. It was one of the things that they suggested. We could find it here in the documentation. Let's find type.
Yeah, I think you just passed it. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is
okay.
if there's any kind of recurrence. So this is a daily. And I don't know. It says it's required, so we probably would have gotten an error if we hadn't included it. Again, this is part of the trial and error, what you provide, and then you take a look at the output. So from there, we can now just go to the end. So now, since this is creating our MeetingJSON, it's wired here to our output MeetingJSON. So if this works, we'll get a meeting and we'll get the whole JSON of what happened. Again, we provided some good input values, test meeting for the 22nd, and pointed to our real template. And so in the testing phase, it's accelerated. We don't have to type anything. We can just click run and see what we get back. So first of all, we did get a bunch of JSON back, and so that's good. Maybe we can take a look at it, and this is a little harder to select. I did get it. Let's see if it. So we could take a look at what we got back in our JSON viewer. And so we see it gave it an ID. The topic came in as topic. We did get the right date, but we didn't get a good topic. The agenda was bad. So looks like I have a problem with that input. We got a JoinURL, which is something we'll be able to use later, and all the settings it either defaulted or got from our template. So this would be fun. Now we can take a look at what's on Zoom, because it looks like we definitely got a meeting. Looks like it's bad. So we have a topic meeting from 8 a.m. Central on this date. And so we can see that that was wrong. And you can also go into it and see visually, did it configure the way that you wanted it to? And then you start working with that. And so we would go back in and delete this and then try again. And so we'll do that several times here to get where we want to go. So we'll delete our meeting. It says it's putting it into the recently deleted, but it will be gone. So let's see if we can see what I did wrong with topic. Very simple one. The input, I called it topics instead of topic, so it didn't wire it correctly. So we could do that one more time. So save and test. We get a content that I'm not even going to look at there. We'll just look at here under meetings. See if it came out right. So we have our test meeting. It's wired correctly, and we're getting an ID, stuff like that. So we're getting very close. This is the part where I noticed that, for example, allow automatically record meeting wasn't checked, and we want that to happen. And in our, this is where I noticed in our meeting templates, this is how it was set up. It was automatically set up to, it was set to automatically record meetings, but it didn't do it. And so it makes me think that the template approach has some limitations. Using Zoom's templates. So from there, what I did is a little bit of discovery, and the steps basically were to I went to the ZoomAPI and looked up the get a meeting item, And so I went to a meeting that I had configured in Zoom that was exactly the way that I want it. And so I did the get and then got a look at the JSON that it created. And then I adapted our create JSON to use that. So there is, and I've already got that prepared, and we don't have time to walk through that whole process. But what I then did is to modify and keep adapting this data to include all the things that it needed. And so we still have, whoops, sorry, lots of scrolling here. So we did have the agenda and all these same things that we had a little while ago, but I wanted it to have a password. We're still setting meeting type 2, but all these settings that, again, came from a good meeting that was configured the way I wanted it to, and so I just dropped them in there. So your mileage may vary. You'll have to experiment with that a little bit, but we'll do this again, save and test. And I don't know if I had deleted that other one out, so I might have to here now. Yeah, I do. And I don't know which one is which, so
It's the second one.
And I'm not even going to mess with it. I'm just going to delete them out, but thank you. Too easy to just create them again. So we'll create it and then refresh. And so when we dig into this meeting now, we can see that it was created the way that we wanted to, with recording and join anytime, and the password set the way we wanted it to. So there's a little bit of back and forth there, but not too bad. So one more time, I'm going to delete this because there's the main thing that we want to get out of this. Delete the right one. The main thing we want to get out of this is the join URL so that we can put it into our code, into our Academy office hours. So we need to get this join URL, and it's really not that hard to do. We had the server JSON that got returned. If we add a parse in the middle here, can look for JSON. We want to parse the JSON into tokens. So we'll just leave that description. It's sufficient. We want to take our meeting JSON and return it into a set of tokens that are going to have, and I'm just going to put the letter M. You can be more or less descriptive, but I was being simple here. So we're going to have M being returned. And if we look at our JSON viewer, we can see that the join URL is the name of the property that we're after. So we can just copy that. And so when we return content now, we want to return the base token of M plus the join URL as the join URL. So one more time, save and test. We run it. And now in addition to all the JSON, which we can do anything we want with, we've got the specific thing that we need, the join URL. So if we run this workflow, pass all this information in, we're going to get our join URL. And so it's going to be very simple to implement as low code. So that's the testing process. We're in good shape. We need to clean things up here in Zoom. So now we're ready to actually get something done. So this is create Zoom meeting from template is our workflow. We need to find the page. I've got it here somewhere on our Academy. This is the one that we're going to add that to. So we'll open that page. And what we're going to do is edit this form that's behind here. And I'm sorry, before we go on, I'm going to find the spot where we are in our discussion. This is, so when we're adding an office hour slot and we create the meeting, we want to customize that form's add button if the date is blank. No, not date. If the meeting URL is blank, we're going to add a Zoom meeting. That's what we're doing. So we customize the form. The form has an add button. I'm going to take a look. Note here that the meeting URL is called p-meeting-URL. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to copy that, but we're going to need that in a minute. So we have our add button. The actions are that it has an error message, it creates a new office hour record and cleans up. But before it creates this record, that's where we're going to want to perhaps create a meeting. So we're going to execute our workflow. This is the, we can look for Zoom here. It says execute the create Zoom meeting from template workflow. And we want this to happen up here. And we only want it to do it if this is blank. So if the URL that was if we have a URL, we can just paste it there and nothing's going to happen. But if you do it with a blank URL, it's going to run this action, and we're going to create a topic. The topic is going to be, I guess we're going to need some more stuff off the top here. The title is the name of this field. So we have p title is 1, and the date is called p date. So I think we can use all those very straightforward. So topic is p title, start time is p date, template ID. Ideally, we should go ahead and have the template ID. It's going to default okay, and the time zone is. So I'm going to, for purposes of this, I'm going to skip it, but we would want to specify a template ID. And then we're going to put this back into p-meeting-URL so that it'll be there available for so the join URL is going to go to the p-meeting-URL. Just wire it there. So this is the part where we give it a test. So we would do a new office hours. Let's say that we're going to do this is open for, we'll set it for Saturday, and that's going to be at 9 a.m. for our time. So we're going to try and, if we do it right, it's set for 9 a.m. Central Time on the 23rd. We're not going to provide the meeting URL. We're going to click add, and where did it go? Here it is. It came in with a join URL, so it sure looks like it worked. And so now if we go over here and refresh again,
it's right at the top there. Yeah.
Yeah, so the date didn't come out right. We'd have some work to do to make sure that the date, I probably needed to have UTC, right? Yeah, it did it for right now. So we'd have to do a little bit of work to make sure that I wire the date correctly, but we'll get that done. But otherwise, it created it with the topic that we wanted. It created it with the parameters that we wanted. So we almost got where we wanted to go. And I want to make sure I get to the webhooks and any questions. Were there anything that we want to address question-wise before we move on to webhooks?
Bogdan had a question earlier about whether or not we could limit attendees.
Load in attendees, absolutely. So that's
limit the number of attendees.
Well, I don't know whether Zoom allows you to limit. I don't know that, but from a API standpoint, there is the ability to add a meeting registrant. So we could add it. We could also list out how many are in there. So you could certainly work with it, but I don't know that if Zoom lets you put in a limit. Okay, were there any others? Cool. Go ahead.
So potentially, I was going to say on the page where we're actually displaying the sign up for office hours, we could wire that button to add the user as an actual registrant in Zoom.
Absolutely,
Yeah,
that would be a great functionality, and I think that's your homework, right? You do a lot with that, so you can test that out. See how I delegated there. All right, let's wrap up with this the webhook part of it. So that was the completion of the objective. We got almost there. We got a little debugging to do, but that one will work. On the actually, give me a second here. We'll go to busy so I don't get bothered by any more messages.
I think the one that's bothering you, I noticed this as well. We cannot use the chat. So I'm not sure if that's a function you as a host have to enable chat.
I'm sure I do. Why it's no wonder we weren't getting any questions. And the answer is I don't know where the option is. So
must be a new Zoom privacy feature.
Yeah, it didn't do that. It did not do that the last time. So we'll get that figured out. Sorry. Okay, so last bit here. To do Zoom webhooks, there was this feature area that I was pointing to earlier in your app. When you define the app, you turn on event subscriptions, and in there you add your own event subscriptions. You can add multiples, but I've only added one, and in there you can subscribe to lots of different events. So when you pick event types, for example, I've subscribed every time a meeting starts or ends or somebody joins or a meeting gets created or has been updated. Every time any of that happens, this webhook will alert. So that's how you turn it on. The webhook itself, and that is described in the documentation. I don't have the link to that handy, but it's in that documentation. But the two steps, you'd have to have an entity to keep this information, and you have to have a webhook to look at it. I'll just show off our webhook here really quickly. So we have a Zoom webinar events from post. So it's a post setup. You have input parameters, so they send you the event timestamp as a Unix timestamp, and a payload. The payload is just a bunch of JSON. So I made an entity that has those. It's called a Zoom webinar event entity, and it has as properties the event, the timestamp, the payload, and so I'm just having created the entity, we get the action to create a new one. So I'm just passing the event. I had problems with the timestamp. I picked a bad type for the date, so I just stopped doing it. But we're getting the event and the payload. And if we want to take a look at what you get out of all this, this is the entity page, the default entity page that we get. And so every time that a meeting is created, we get a meeting created event, and you can see it recorded a topic of a somewhat live test of LCA office hours. So every time we created and deleted a meeting here as we've been working along, these webhooks have been flowing to our API and been posted just as records. So from there, you could set up anything that you wanted to parse. For example, if somebody creates a meeting and you want to react to that, you could set up a database trigger looking for meeting created events, and you got to have all the details, or when people sign up, or all the different events that are there. We also get when they sign in. So if you wanted to send an email to people who come to your meeting, just as soon as they access your meeting, you're going to have their email address, and so you could send them a here's the outline of what we're going to do today, or whatever. So it allows you to be very, very interactive with Zoom. As a final thought, I believe you have the ability to raise your hand. So if there are questions from today and you want to raise your hand and ask them directly, I'd be happy to take them on. And Ben, I think you were the one that raised that you had a question. So if you want to participate, you're welcome to just unmute and ask. I don't want to put you on the spot.
No question, just letting you know about the chat.
All right, cool. Thanks for that. All right, with that, we've come to the end of our hour. So I want to thank you for attending today. We hopefully we've showed a good way, a good deal of the way, and the capability of the way that we can integrate with Zoom, that you can, whatever Zoom opens up to you, we have a way to access and to interact with. And so low-code and Zoom as a good pair.
Thanks, Dave. And if you allow me, I think the possibilities that arise from here to automate Zoom meetings are limitless, because we use Zoom in many different ways. Sometimes we use them for sales meetings where you have different processes. Sometimes, like in this case, for scheduling some office hours. So the fact that you can put the Zoom in a process, put the Zoom meetings in a part of a process, I think it's changing when you have, of course, high volume of meetings. So hopefully that was the message that we also managed to express in this meeting, in this webinar.
Absolutely. All right, thank you all, and we look forward to doing another one for you next week. See you then.